Hey, this is Rob Anspach, and welcome back to another edition of E-Heroes for those keeping count. This is episode 248, and I brought on a guest who we're going to talk about leadership coaching. And, it's one of those subjects that, as entrepreneurs, you probably think, well, do I really need to be coached? Do I really need to understand leadership? And yeah, you do. So I want to bring on Mike Phillips, and we're going to have a fun chat. So thanks, Mike, for being here, and this is going to be good.
Absolutely, Rob. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the invitation, and yeah, I'm excited to get into talking about leadership, self-leadership, team leadership. I mean, I think it permeates a lot of our lives, sometimes more than we know or acknowledge. So, absolutely.
And I think some of us, well, especially me, I've been shaped throughout my years before I was an entrepreneur. By leaders that weren't very good leaders. And I think that's what made me want to be an entrepreneur. I saw them doing things that I thought were weird, were wonky, were borderline illegal. And I thought, you know what, this is not for me. I don't want to be caught up in this. I don't want to even be taught how to do this. I'm out. And but my very first job back in 1985, well, working for someone else.
Sure.
I worked as a bag boy at a grocery store. And Mr. Herr, his name was Mr. Herr, he owned John Herr's Village Market. It's still there, but he's been deceased for a while. He made us wear ties. We had to wear slacks. We had to greet the customer. We had to understand how the customer thought. We had to bag their groceries the right way. We had to take those groceries, load them in the car. A lot of that stuff you don't even see today. You go to a grocery store and everybody looks the same. Mm-hmm. Nobody's wearing ties. Nobody's wearing slacks. Nobody cares how your groceries look when they leave that store, and nobody's putting them in their car. So, the things that I learned from Mr. Herr helped me appreciate becoming an entrepreneur. Sure. I wanted to do things differently, to do things better, to stand out. But, you look at the world today and it's like, nobody cares.
Well, I don't know that it's nobody cares. I think a lot of times where Mr. Herr was he was your example and your coach, he had a vested interest because it was his thing. Right. Mm-hmm. And so just like you going into entrepreneurship, that's your thing. Like automatically you care about what your thing is, whatever that may be. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of leaders, a lot of managers, people that are in business mistake and think, well, because I'm paying you, you should care as much as I do. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't always work. The other thing is I think there's a lot right now, just from where I said, I've been in automotive for many, many years. I think oftentimes we promote the wrong people into leadership and management because you say, hey, they're really good at this job. I was talking with somebody about this yesterday. They say, well, they're a very good salesperson, or they're a fantastic engineer, or they're great at marketing. Let's make them a manager.
Right.
And then they get the title. And by getting the title, that assumes a leadership role, but they don't actually have the necessary skills, like relationship skills, for example, to be a good leader. They may not have the skill sets. They have the skill sets to be a good salesperson or a good marketer or a good engineer, but leadership really does have a different set of skills. Mm-hmm. Just because I can, and using the automotive industry, because that's my background for so long, just because I can slang a whole bunch of cars, right? Oh man, I want to sell all these cars. Does that mean that I can teach other salespeople what I do on a daily basis? Does it mean that I can manage the day-to-day of the dealership to be able to market and attract other people? It just because you're good at one thing does not automatically make you a good leader, in my opinion. Now, by default, again, going back to what you said a minute ago, Rob, yeah, if that's your thing, mm-hmm. Passion will carry you to a lot of places, right? Passion will and when you have that vested interest, that passion will fuel enthusiasm. Enthusiasm will give you a great attitude. That'll help you to get customers excited and other employees excited and other people excited about what it is that you're doing. But that excitement also can only carry you so far. You do have to develop the skills to be a good leader.
Yeah, one of my friends years ago said, I'm not a very effective leader. I don't want to run my business anymore. So he hired somebody to step in that role, and he took a step back and he said, I'm just going to be the salesperson. Yes, I own the business, but I'm not going to make any of the leadership decisions anymore. I know my limitations. I just don't want to do it anymore. And I thought, wow, okay, that's different. I think that was the very first person I ever came across that, decided, he didn't want to be a leader anymore.
Well, is it that or did he just have the realization? Did he have enough humility to understand, hey, I could get somebody else that has better skill sets than what I do, and then I can go do this thing that I'm passionate about and really excel at it?
Yeah.
He
was good at selling, and that's what he did. And he sold everything for the company, but he just didn't want to, boss people around anymore. He didn't want to tell them what to do. He didn't want to lay down the rules. And
sure.
And
I think that in itself, I think takes a real strong sense of self and self leadership to be able to do something like that, because it's, especially if it's your own thing. I think that's really difficult to say, hey, this is something I'm not good at. I can only perform this at 50 or 60%. And if I could get somebody that can perform at an 80%, 90%, 100% level, if that's what they're wired for. And I think a lot of times, especially entrepreneurs, have a tough time acknowledging that or accepting that. Right? Like, hey, I may not be wired for this thing, so I may have to fill the gap by getting somebody else that is wired for that particular piece, whether it be leadership or sales or marketing or creative or, whatever that one thing may be. So oftentimes as entrepreneurs, like, we have that type A personality, and one of the theories I read, and I don't remember who it was, it might have been John Maxwell years ago, that said, look, if you can get somebody to perform at 80% of what you're able to perform for, then hand that duty off so that you can move and you can go somewhere else and you can do something else that you excel at. But I think that's really hard for type A personalities. That's really hard for us to do, because sometimes we love it and we think, well, I've already done that thing. So we go, yeah, just give it to me. Just let me do it. Just let me handle it. And so I think that shows a lot of character, a lot of humility for someone to take a step back, a lot of self-leadership to take a step back and say, why don't you do this?
Yeah. And I have that, I guess I have that flaw too. I mean, I just like to get shit done. And I'm like, okay, it's been sitting on that person's desk too long. Let me just do it.
Sure.
And I get it done in 5 minutes. And they're like, hey, why'd you do my work? I'm like, because you're just sitting there, you're not doing it. How'd it get done?
Because I asked. Well, I don't know that that's a flaw. I think that's just that comes down to wiring sometimes. I mean, can you look at it as a flaw? Sure. I think when it comes to, and this is just personal opinion, you could certainly tell me better than I can pontificate on it. But when it comes down to business, like, if you're really looking to scale, then that's a different discussion. Right. Yeah. If it's especially if we're like, I've been involved in small business for a long time. For us, for small business, I still do that. I'll jump in and I'm like, just give it to me. Let me handle it. Same thing. I can knock this out in 15 minutes. It's going to take you an hour. And I asked you 3 days ago. Right. That's an easy out. But especially if you're looking to scale, I think then that brings you to a whole different conversation of things like accountability. Right. And if that person's not being accountable, then part of being a good leader in that role is how do you create accountability with the person? And if they're not being accountable to what you guys have, I like to manage by agreement. So if they're not being accountable to the agreement that you have, then sometimes, that it's the 3 T's. You got to train them so that they can do the task to the expectation. Maybe you transfer them to a different position. Like I said a minute ago, sometimes people are not wired for what it is that they're doing, or you got to terminate them. And that's tough. A lot of people, they don't want to get into the termination discussion, but sometimes you're doing somebody a favor if they are not in the right role, or they're not doing the actions that are necessary.
We've seen this over the course of the last year, especially with Disney. Disney is one of my favorite companies. I love going to Disney, but here you had Bob Chapek, who took over for Bob Iger. Bob Iger is a natural leader. I mean, he's just very charismatic. He can get stuff done. People just will do what he wants them to do. Bob Chapek, on the other hand, rubbed people the wrong way. And although he was great at the things that he was good at, he was not a natural leader. So it was very hard for him to get into that role to begin with. And then people didn't see eye to eye with him. And then he thought, well, this is going to be great. I can just, ease in and tell people what to do, how Bob Iger did. And nobody listened to him. They didn't respect him. And within a very short period of time, he was ousted and Iger came back. And entrepreneurs look at that. They look at other people and how they do things and like, well, if I emulate that, will this happen? If I do this, will this happen? And I think that's kind of hard to do. You can't judge other entrepreneurs how they lead because, for me, it's my personality. I'm very sarcastic. And,
no,
if I try to be that way to some of my crew, they're going to quit. So I have to learn to pull back a little bit, but in the same respect, it's like, do it.
Sure. Well, I think so. One of the things going back for a couple things that I take close to heart, and what you're saying, so many entrepreneurs will lead one way. They lead in what's effective for them, not what's effective for others.
Right.
And the best leaders are the ones that can teach, train, execute on one task 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 different ways, so that you're able to connect with different people where they're at. Yeah, like I think that's one of the pieces of leadership that's really valuable is you have to be able to meet people where they are. You can't always bring them to where you are, and not that you should never bring them to where you are. But I think that's something that often I remember, back in, I've heard stories of, I was not there, but Vince Lombardi, coaching the Green Bay Packers in the 60s, took over an absolutely losing team, completely just terrible. I think their last several seasons, they'd gone 1-9 or whatever it was. They're just terrible. And he comes in, same players, same people, but speaks to the players differently, trains first their minds and then their bodies to go and execute. And I think they had something like 8 plays, right? It wasn't an absurd amount, but they executed all of their plays with such brilliance because that was all they did. And he was able to communicate on a level. If you got 10 different players, you're able to communicate with those 10 different players 10 different ways so that they can execute those 8 plays flawlessly. And so the rumor is, and again, I wasn't there, but I like the story of the rumor, is that they would be lining up against other teams and look them right in the eye and be like, hey, we're going to flea flicker right on 3. You ready? And because they could perform it with such brilliance, they were able to take off and go. And literally the next season turned it around to a winning season. So I think that's something that, I say all that story to say this is like, as leaders, we do need to learn to have different levels of communication. You said it. Hey, if I'm communicating with some of my staff at that high level of sarcasm, like this is where Rob lives, right? But if I'm living over here, that's going to be a problem for some. And it takes some real emotional intelligence, I think, to understand that. It takes some restraint sometimes to understand that,
For me, lots of restraint.
Lots. Well, that ties it. I mean, even when I got into coaching and learning about leadership, I was coaching youth hockey back in the late '90s, and that was one of the first places I realized that leadership can be taught. First and foremost, in the foundation of leadership for me is its relationship. Right, you have to form a relationship. So using those youth hockey players as an example, like I had a real relationship with those hockey players. I knew what their skills, their abilities, their talents, what their strengths were, what their weaknesses were, what they could and couldn't do. And I learned that about their parents. And so when you have that relationship, you're able to push people outside of what they're normally comfortable going after. And so that coaching piece, because I think I was 19 when I got my first coaching gig. I had no business coaching, youth sports or otherwise. I was like, hey, that looks really fun. And I had played hockey and I understood it. And I'm like, yeah, hey, I think I could do that. Well, one of the things I realized is, besides the relationship piece, they put out books on hockey coaching. There were other good hockey coaches that I could follow and model. There were other just going through and reading the rule book and the referee book gave me a better understanding and made me a better coach. But it took those activities of me actually taking action and pursuing, having a desire to learn, that piece. And that was one of the places where in my passion about leadership and kind of the psychology of leadership and how those things work, that was where I got really excited about it. It was like, I knew, I was like, in my head, I was going, I'm not going to be a great coach. But by the end of the first couple of years, we were actually a pretty formidable, had a really good competitive youth hockey program.
And you just kind of hit it right on the head, is that it takes time. It's you can't just jump right in and say, hey, I'm going to be a good leader, or read a book on being a good leader.
Right.
It doesn't work. But it's the culmination of everything that you learn over a period of time, that maybe you become calmer, maybe become more patient, maybe you become less sarcastic, maybe whatever it is, you got to be able to use that to get people to understand you, for them to listen to you and get work done.
It's the start of wisdom, right? Wisdom is applied knowledge. It's one thing to know something. It's another to actually apply it and use it and grow through it. And even if you know something, you can be one of the smartest people. We were talking about this right beforehand, right? You can be one of the smartest people in the world, and the smartest people in the room. You can know how to do anything, but if you're not actually to apply it and learn through some failures, and you just think that that's how it's going to be, you're still a bonehead. Let's call it how it is. I'm just waiting for you to bring up the Elon Musk Mark Zuckerberg cage match, because we were talking right before we go live, right? You're talking about, hey, did you see the cage match? And so I had not. Yeah, so of course I've Googled it.
It's I don't know who initiated what, but Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg apparently are going to have a cage match where they're going to duke it out, and I don't know what that's going to prove. Facebook versus Twitter. Is it just a publicity stunt? But here you got two billionaires that are acting like idiots, and it just amazes me. There you go. You got two guys that own lots of businesses. Facebook owning Instagram, WhatsApp, and Musk owning Tesla, Twitter.
Who knows what else?
Who else? Yeah, it's just a lot of, and they want to beat each other up. So that's not a leadership to me. That has nothing to do with. That's just flexing your stupidity.
No, all that is doing that's what everybody in the world is waiting for, this real life meme to happen. That is all that is going to happen. It's like you're talking about Facebook versus Twitter. I can't wait to see the videos that come out after that. I mean, if it actually even happens, like it's complete humor or satire, or I don't even know. But you're right. It doesn't demonstrate any sort of leadership, wisdom, not any real business fortitude or relationship or people skills. It just comes off as a complete publicity stunt.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah. And not to sideline this to make this about me, because I always like to talk about me.
Absolutely.
But we talked about relationships, and before we got on air, you showed me that you were reading my book, Lessons from the Dojo.
Absolutely.
And this is one of those books that I wrote not to make somebody a better leader or a better person. It was one of those books that I thought, you know what, humanity needs to be improved. And it's 101 kick butt ways to improve your life, business, and relationships. Yes, and by doing some of those things in the book, you're going to become a better leader. You're going to become a better marketer. You're going to become a better salesman, better husband, better wife, better human being.
It's well, one of the things, and we were talking right before the air. This was the first book I bought from you, and the thing is, when you and I connected online, and I see some of the stuff you post, and I saw you were an author, and I was like, oh, okay, this is really cool, and you don't know exactly what to expect. I didn't know what I was going to get. Like the title, 100, lessons from the dojo. I'm going, oh, okay, what am I getting up for? But I liked you. We already had established a little bit of an online relationship, and I knew that I liked you as a person, and so I said, okay, we'll give this a shot, right? And I think you messaged me at some titles and so forth and said, hey, check this one out and that one out, and sent me one online. And so I ordered this. And to date, and I just thought it was funny when you were sharing the story and saying, hey, the book launch, and I was in Italy and there was some different stuff, and I wrote it because I thought it would be valuable. This, to me, I have enjoyed so much because it's real life. It's relatable. It's human. I mean, it is something we all need. And I'll give you the plug. If people are watching or listening to the podcast, go buy it right now. It's available on Amazon. Lessons from the Dojo by Rob Anspach, because it's a simple read. I made it when I got it. I just read. I read one lesson a day, most days. I can't say that it's every day.
When I started writing,
mm-hmm.
My very first book was Share. It was all social media, and that came out in 2013. And now I had written articles and whatnot for other people and in that other magazines. But when I came up with this idea that I wanted to make my book simple, that anybody could pick it up and in 2 hours be done and go about their day. That's, I hate complicated books. Not that I can't read them. I love them. But to most people, they're intimidating. They pick them up, they start to read, they can't understand the words, they put the book down, and they just wasted $40. I wanted to keep my book simple, to the point, give them a lesson or two or three, and move on. And so, I had written a bunch of books before Lessons from the Dojo, but I wanted that one to be micro lessons that every page was a different lesson. And people are like, well, Rob, that sounds dumb. And I'm like, what do you think chicken soup for the soul is?
Yeah. What do you, well, I mean, on a different level, what do you think? Like, that's how daily devotionals work, right? You go in, you get your daily lesson, you get your connection, and what can you do and how can you apply that? And that was because I wrote a devotional 2 years ago now, goodness. And it was a 30-day devotional, and it's super, super small, and same sort of thing. People are like, well, why is it so short? I said, it's 30 days. It's like one page a day. Like, it's one lesson a day. You get a piece of scripture, you get a lesson. And I had started writing, which I'll hopefully finish this year, is a leadership book. And same deal. I was like, I want to keep it like 100 pages. And people are like, well, why just 100 pages? I said, because it's bite-sized. People that are in leadership and management roles don't have time. Okay. So what can I pack in there that's really good? And so I think that's something that's really valuable too, as how can you be concise? And I think that's something like I said, for me, that's of your books that I've read, and I've read several, that one's my favorite one because it's concise and it's real life. And it's
out of the 37 books that I've produced to date, I keep them all between 120, 150 pages. I mean, now there is one that is only, I think, 70 pages. That was produced for a client. but that's all they wanted. They wanted
Sure.
something micro small, and it was just easy to get, send people. And then I have one that's like 300 pages, but by and large, they're 100 to 150 pages. And because I want them to be simple, I want them when they pick up the book that they're going to laugh or they're going to cry, they're going to feel some type of emotion, learn something and move on.
Yep. No, you have a really fun way of writing. A lot of what was I don't the Rob versus books when you're sharing those. I mean, and this is from the other person's perspective, like how to not do marketing, right? I think it's just brilliant the way that you've harnessed those and
funny
brought them
because
in.
when I came up with the idea that I was going to share some of these stories that I deal with scammers and morons and lousy customer service. I had been sharing these stories on Facebook, and someone said, "Rob, put them in a book." And I was never big on compilation books.
Sure.
I had looked back and I thought, well, I love Lessons from the Dojo. I love writing it. It just wasn't a very big commercial success because, at the time I was in Italy when the book launched. And so I didn't give it much promotion. And so I didn't want to repeat that. But as I was assembling all the stories for Rob versus the Scammers, which was the first book in a series, I thought, this is going to be helpful to people. People are going to like this. They're going to laugh. It's going to teach them a micro lesson. They're going to move on. They're going to laugh some more. And so I launched Rob versus the Scammers in 2019. Mm-hmm. People loved it. And I had people from London, Australia, and Japan, and they're like, this is great. Write some more. And I had no intention of writing any more.
Now you got like a whole series of them.
I didn't want to write a sequel. And I thought, well, Rob versus the Scammers 2 is going to be stupid. So I got to change the title. So I did Rob versus the Morons, Rob versus Humanity, Rob versus the Entitled, Rob versus, I don't even know the other ones.
Yahoos. I think you got a Yahoos one in there, don't you?
Wackadoos, Yahoos, unicorns. And then I have enough material now to write 3 more Rob versus books. But in that time, I've had an opportunity to write a pilot episode for the Rob versus series to turn into a future TV show.
That would be fun.
But now they have the writer's strike, so I don't know what's going to happen. But you never know the experiences that you share, how they're going to impact someone else. So whether you're a leader, whether you're a storyteller, whether you want to just write a book, the experiences that you learned over the course of your lifetime, no matter what that number is, it could be 19, could be 20, could be 54, or even older. Those will teach a lesson to somebody else that they can learn better and be more productive. And so that's what I do. I like to share my adventures with people, and with the Rob versus, I do take people's last names out that have that need to be taken out.
Sure.
I do that because I don't need to be vindictive. I don't need to rub someone's name in the dirt. Yeah, they screwed up, but they don't need to be in print for eternity. Now, for those that I have praised, that I believe have gone above and beyond to service humanity, I do put their full names in there because I want people to understand that this is the person that they can trust to help them in some way. And yeah.
No, and I think it's great. I think one of the things you just said and that you just touched on too, when you're talking about, people and experiences and what can they learn and what can they, I think there's so much value that can be added to others if 2 things happen. One, if we're willing to be real and raw with what that experience is. I think so often people temper what it is that they're saying because they don't want to hurt somebody else's feelings, or they don't want to come off as spreading gossip or whatever that may be. And sometimes we over temper what it is that we're sharing about that experience. And when you temper that, you lose perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the valuable pieces of sharing those life lessons, hey, here's the thing that happened to me that really sucked,
Mm-hmm.
is that shares your perspective and maybe gives a new spin on somebody else's current take.
Mm-hmm.
And likewise, when you're telling somebody, hey, this is what worked for me and it was really great and you got to do this, right? Because they could be sitting in that spot just stuck in the muck and going, this sucks. All those rhyming things, right? And saying, gosh, this is terrible. And you come in from the side and say, hey, I had that same thing happen.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you about it. But the only way that you can get somebody to the other side of what it is that they're experiencing right now is if you are real and raw and you share your genuine perspective on them taking that. And I think it is, so, I mean, that's something I would tell people, anybody that's, watching or listening to this episode, is don't temper yourself to the point that it loses your genuine perspective,
Mm-hmm.
because then you are stealing your experience and the opportunity for somebody else to really learn and genuinely give them value.
Yeah. Yeah. And, one of the things that I really love is that people who have read my books
Mm-hmm.
will then post on social, hey, I had the same experience and this is my conversation, and I just laugh and they tag me in it. And sometimes if I think it's really good, I'll put it in another of my Rob versus books just to give them praise, and they love it. I just
sometimes it's probably the same scammers.
Yeah. Well, and I've come to believe that they're using my Rob versus the scammers as their playbook. They think they know me. They contact me constantly, and I think they train new people on me all the time. And
I feel that, man.
But almost 10 books, 50 stories per book. That's 500 stories. That's a lot of stories.
That's a ton, man.
And
that's insane.
And that's just a fraction of the ones that I get 30 to 40 calls a day. And try to keep people on the phone long enough for the conversation to actually make it into a book. It's like one a day. It's just,
that's wild.
They've trained them so good now that as soon as you try to deviate them off the script,
mm-hmm.
It's just, yeah.
Well, I mean, one thing that makes it hard is because I in automotive, I work inside a call center, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that's so hard is like when you have people, if you have a genuine product that you're selling somebody, call it a car, a house, a computer. Like if somebody genuinely like, hey, someone wanted this information and I'm reaching out to you to be able to do this. Like the whole series of scammers and Yahoos and all those people have given like genuine business people a bad name, because it's almost impossible to make a phone call. If your phone is not programmed in someone's phone, it's almost impossible to call them and get them to answer at this point.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah, but there are ways to get through, but I think by and large the phone has become, I'm not saying it's become useless. I just think it's being used for nefarious purposes that people just don't want to answer the phone anymore.
Absolutely.
And those that do, like me, I just string people along because if I can waste their time from scamming, it's one less person that they've scammed. And
saving the world one scam call at a time, man.
That's right. I would love to be able to see, the books become a TV show. I think everybody would be entertained, and I think that it would provide not only fun for people, entertainment, but lessons that they can learn.
Absolutely.
It's not that everybody's going to be a natural born leader. I think it takes time, like we said. But I think that if I can at least instill in somebody, a few extra ways for them to think differently about leadership, then I'm leaving my mark.
Absolutely. One thing I will share here, because you've said this a couple times too, is like it takes time. I think we have right now in society with social media, with YouTube, with all these online assets that we have available to us, it distorts time. It distorts how long it takes, because somebody could look you up. For example, they could look up Rob and say, "Hey, you said 37 books now, right?" And seamlessly, or even using the podcast, you're up in the hundreds of episodes now. Well,
yeah, this one here is 248, but I've already recorded 250, and
yeah,
I recorded a little bit of out of order, but when I batch record everything, sometimes I don't know what order they're going in. But
sure,
yeah.
But the thing is, here's what distorts the time. Somebody can go on and listen to podcast 1 at 2:00 this afternoon, and at 2:30 they're listening to podcast 240. And at 3:00 they get wound up and they're listening to 2:30 or whatever. That whole gap of time is completely compressed. And we see the same thing on YouTube when you're talking about, okay, let's learn about leadership. Let's learn how to do this skill. Let's learn how to do this thing. You see this person that started in 2006 or 2010 or 2015, and seamlessly the next video you're watching is 2023 when they're crushing it and they got Lamborghinis and blah, 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 all the other stuff. And we go, oh my gosh, I want to be that person. I want to be able to accomplish that in 8 minutes. And it's like, no. That was 8 years compressed into these 2 videos that they were willing to share a piece of their journey. But I think especially the next generation of people in general, they have this distorted sense of the amount of time needed to gain experience at anything.
Last year I went to my 35th high school reunion, so that kind of tells you how old I am. But I walk in and everybody, we kind of all reverted back to when we were 18.
Sure.
And they're like, "What, Rob? You write books, but you were lousy in English." I'm like, "I'm still lousy in English, but there you go."
Sure.
So it's a lot of the things that we did 35 years ago is not who we are now. But people don't understand that they have a notion of who you are, and what you've become. It doesn't jive with them. So I think for me, being an entrepreneur is the challenge every day of learning to be me, not necessarily offending people, but knowing that I can't please everybody. I can't work with everybody. But those people who I want on my team, I will bend over backwards to make sure that they understand who I am, what I do, what I stand for. And, sure. It's not that I'm yelling at them or condescending or, I do want things done my way, but sometimes the employee, and I've been there, I've done that, I've been on the other side. We don't understand who you are. We don't understand your mission. We don't understand it. Or it's completely foreign to us, so we're going to ask questions. We're going to have to give you pushback. So I think leaders need to understand where that oddball's coming from, and
sure.
And I think by doing so, by taking that time to understand that one person who's giving you flack, they understand who you are, and they appreciate you as a leader better.
That goes back to relationship. 100%. If you have to know them, but you have to allow them to know you as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, where do people go to find you? Where, I mean, I know that we talked about your website. Do you want to send people to your website? Do you want to send them somewhere else?
Probably the best and most active place I'm at right now is YouTube.
Okay.
I'm on YouTube. I have a weekly podcast that I do. I'm getting back into sharing. So I've got probably 300 leadership videos that people can go on and view for free. I've done 4 different podcasts, and so if they were to go to youtube.com/ and then just the @sign, I'm the new school @Mike Phillips.
Yeah, I always forget they put that @ thing in there, and I'm like, well, what the heck? I guess I'm just old.
So that you can go there. I'm certainly most active there. Check that channel out. You can contact me through that. I do have my website. People can contact it. It needs an overhaul. I don't need it. Rob, don't judge me, man. But you can go lead the team.
Judged you, yeah.
I know. Leadtheteam.net, and you can contact me, message me through there, email me through there. Certainly, I'm still active there, but definitely more active on YouTube.
And the website goes to your YouTube and your socials and.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
And connect with me. I'm on all the social networks, Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and you name it. If there's a social media flavor of choice that you prefer, I'm there just like I know you are, Rob. So I'd love to connect if people would like to get into some more in-depth leadership conversations, or if you have questions, or like I said, I've got several hundred videos on sales and leadership. If anybody wants to take a look at those,
not that anybody wants to. I think they must. They must, and they have to binge watch them. So if you're going to go over to YouTube, you have to binge watch. You can't stop until you're done with them. I'm just
hours and hours. It's years worth of videos that I put out.
Yeah,
but that's okay. Binge watch, man. Binge watch.
Yeah, you'll either it'll either violate the Geneva Convention on Torture, or you'll love them. And I always tell people, look, if you like my videos, great, but stop posting those weird comments. I don't know why people do that. You go there, I get these notifications. Oh, someone left a comment on your YouTube, and it's so derogatory, and it's like. So I click on their channel. No videos, no banner pictures.
It's always somebody with no videos, man. It's always somebody with no videos.
So it's like, make some videos so I can comment.
Yeah. Put in the work, man. Put in the work.
Yeah. And that's what I want people to understand is that, yes, it's easy to be a keyboard warrior. We all got these, but put in the work. Make
Absolutely.
yourself some videos and you know what? When people criticize you, you can lash out if you wish, or just dismiss it. I'm kind of like Shrek when it comes to all those negative reviews. He compares it to being an onion with multiple layers, and
or you can compile it and then you have Rob versus the keyboard warriors.
Yeah, and I think that was one of my outlets. By taking these stories, by sharing them out, I don't get upset with people as much as I used to, because to me it became a game. How long can I upset? And a friend of mine says, Rob, one of these days you're gonna make one of these scammers have a stroke on the line. And I said, oh, that would be glorious. And he started laughing, and someone then gave me hell about saying that on Facebook. I'm like, really?
They chose they're choosing to be there.
It's like, how many people can I trigger today? So, everybody out there, go binge watch Mike's videos. Go to his website. Even if it's outdated, you'll learn more about who he is. You'll learn about, his years in coaching, his leadership abilities, and what he can do for you. So, this is why Mike's an e-hero. And we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Adios.
Thanks, Rob.